So after the last video, my initial plan was to move straight into the second half of the Theta Gang strategy, which is cash covered puts. But a handful of viewers had some criticisms of covered calls that I feel need to be addressed before we can move on. For example, Ricardo Cortez asks, so what happens with the covered call if my stock tanks? Doesn't understand joke apparently believes that you'll be stuck there bag holding on shares that you would otherwise not want. Jack Malloy is concerned that you're retaining too much downside risk while you limit your upside. And Walkie Talkie is apparently so concerned about volatility that he thinks covered calls do not work as a strategy. He asks, what if a stock that you sold a covered call against goes down by $3? You'll be stuck bag holding and you won't be able to get your money back. Then what do you do? Well, interestingly enough, there's actually a term for the type of trading that Walkie Talkie is describing, and that is trading like shit. And if you generally subscribe to the TLS strategy, I strongly suggest that you stop trading until you learn what you're doing. But aside from Walkie Talkie, we do have some valid concerns. So let's answer. What happens when you sell a covered call and the stock tanks? Let's answer this question by using an example. Pretend for a second that you bought a struggling stock like GameStop. You bought 100 shares for $10 each, so you're in at $1,000 total. Because you're a smart Theta Gang warrior, you immediately turned around and sold a covered call at the $10 strike and collected $100 in premium. Once you account for the $100 you collected in premium, you're now in at $900. That is called your basis, and you will profit on this covered call as long as GameStop stays above $9 on expiration. But if you follow GameStop, then you probably know that it hasn't been a very pretty picture lately. So let's just assume that GameStop did not stay above $9 by your expiration date. Instead, GameStop drops down to $5. Now, those 100 shares are only worth $500. The call contract will expire worthless because it's $5 below the strike, so you'll keep the $100 in cash. But even after subtracting that premium from your basis, you're still down $400 overall. That's better than being $500 down if you had just bought 100 shares of GameStop outright, but you're still down $400 overall nonetheless. Although I made fun of him before, this is the exact problem that Walkie Talkie was concerned about. Here we are bag holding a stock that has dropped substantially in value, and right here he says you can keep trying week after week, but it can take a long time to recover your losses from big moves, and he's absolutely right. And we can prove that by looking at the Robinhood options chain for GameStop. As you can see here, the $10 strike isn't even trading for the November expiration. And if you are willing to sell at your $9 basis, you're only going to collect about $5 in premium by November. And if you were adamant about setting a $10 strike price, you'd have to set your expiration all the way out until the middle of January, and then you'd be lucky to gain $20 in premium. That's 4 months after your initial covered call expired, and your basis is still way up at $880. That really does suck, and as a trader, you will find yourself in that situation and you'll have to make a choice. Fortunately, there's a couple of strategies that might work out for you. Choice 1 is to sell another call at a strike price below your basis. That way you can collect more premium. Of course, the risk with that is, if your stock recovers more quickly than you expect, your shares might get called away from you and you would overall have to sell at a loss, even after accounting for your premiums. And for that reason, this is not my preferred response. Another choice is just to hold the depreciated stock until it recovers to your basis, then resume selling covered calls. The problem with that is you may be bag holding for a long time, potentially years, and while you're sitting on all that dead money, you're going to miss out on other opportunities to trade. You should only do this if you're very confident that your stock will recover. Of course, if you don't like either of those options, you could just sell the stock at a loss, keep the premium, and move on. It'll get you back in the game faster, but your risk, of course, is that you'll look like a fool when the stock recovers, or you're upset, you start trading emotionally, you move on too quickly to another option to try to get your money back, and you end up losing money again. So this is not my preferred choice either. There's really no obvious answer on how to handle it when you're selling covered calls and your stock just tanks. So here's some advice from me, Mikey Millions, to you. First, pick a stock that you're okay holding long term. A good example might be a big company like Apple, or maybe an index fund like the SPY. Never use covered calls just as a means of collecting high premium. The highest premiums tend to be the most volatile stocks, and that means they're the most likely to crash down and not come back up. 2. Sell calls at or above your basis, even if it means waiting a longer time before your expiration date. This way, whenever your shares do get called away, at least you won't be selling them at an overall loss. 3. Remember that your goal is to slowly lower your basis by selling covered calls and collecting premium. And don't forget, you will collect dividends even when you're bag holding. And those dividends can also help you lower your basis. And my last bit of advice is don't use covered calls if you are married to the underlying stock. For example, if you just love AMD and you are so sure that it's going to go up to $50 any day now, do not sell covered calls against it because you're limiting your upside. And if you do see the stock rocket higher past your strike, you'll be very upset that you sold a covered call against it and therefore limited your upside. Then you'll start trading emotionally and you will end up with a loss. So don't sell covered calls if you absolutely love the underlying stock, and you will lose sleep if it's not in your portfolio. Last thing I want to do is just show you guys some of the stocks that I use with covered calls. My second favorite right now is AMD. You get about 2% a week if you're selling at the money calls, and it's relatively cheap. It's only $30 right now in September 2019. I also like this strategy with Microsoft. You get a medium premium, and it's great to hold long term because this company's not going anywhere. Apple is also a very good choice with covered calls. It's got a decent premium compared to its volatility, and it pays a dividend, so that even if you do get stuck bag holding when the price goes down, you're still going to be getting a decent amount of money from it. The SPY, the S&P 500's ETF, is also a very good choice because it has a medium premium, and since it's an ETF that tracks an index, you can hold it forever and eventually you will get your money back. And my absolute favorite is Google, which pays a very high premium, even short-term $100 out of the money, you'll still get a great premium from it. However, it is expensive. They're going for about $1,200 each right now, but if you can afford it, that's about $120,000, you can get excellent premiums off of this, and with $250,000, you could probably make a living just selling Google covered calls. Just some ideas for you guys to consider. If you're interested in a little bit more depth on how to pick trades, I recommend checking out thetagang.com's podcast, episode 8 by Junie. I'll drop a link in the description for you guys. This video went about 4 minutes longer than I had expected, but I hope you all got something out of it, and I hope this answers some of the concerns that a lot of people had about covered calls. Now that this is settled, we can move on in the next video to the second half of the Theta Gang strategy, which is selling covered puts. If you haven't already, please do like and subscribe so that you can keep up with the next video. Thanks for watching.